Hello, my name is Carl Niji, and I am the owner-operator of a business called Overcoming Dyslexia, ADD, ADHD and Learning Disabilities, and I practice and live in Ottawa, Canada. The reason I've come on here today is to do a short introduction video as to what it is I do and how I help people. So I'm what's known as a Davis Facilitator, and Davis Facilitators provide programs for people with a range of what we call learning disabilities in Canada. The term learning disability in Canada is used in two ways. First of all, it's used as a general term known by the general public, and it's also used as a specific type of learning disability. Under this general umbrella, there are many types of learning disabilities. As Davis Facilitators, we quite quickly drop the term learning disability and use the term dyslexia instead. We use many other names or labels that people have been diagnosed with, and they range from dyslexia, ADD, ADHD, learning disability type 1, type 2, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, apraxia, dysphasia, nonverbal learning disability, PDD, NOS. There are many things that people could be diagnosed with. Really the name or the label is really describing what the person can't do, so what they find difficult to do. So as Davis Facilitators, we help people with a range of the spectrum of what we call a learning disability. There are two types of facilitators. One deals with this learning disability spectrum. The other deals with the autism Asperger's spectrum, and it's good to make that distinction. The people who are autistic facilitators or Davis autistic facilitators, they are usually qualified as well to work with the learning disability spectrum. But they are two different standalone conditions, and facilitators deal with them separately. So why am I called a Davis Facilitator? Well, that's really quite simple. The programs get their name, and I get my name from an individual called Ron Davis. And he was born in the United States in 1942, I believe. And he was diagnosed as a baby as a Canner's baby. Now, we've replaced the term Canner's baby with the term autism or Asperger's if you're on that spectrum. But Ron was born before the term was even existed. And as he grew up, it became evident that he was also severely dyslexic. He didn't speak properly until he was 17. In early school, he was basically diagnosed as uneducatable and pretty much left alone, I think. Later on, he actually taught himself to read, and as he went through life, it wasn't until about the age of 38 that he really began to see how his dyslexia was working for himself and what he could do about it. Over the years, he found out more and more about this and began to formulate ideas and theories as to how it worked for himself. And then word got out that there was this unusual man down in San Francisco working with all kinds of what we now call a learning disability spectrum. So Ron is a brilliant individual. He is the author of 3 books. I'll show them to you now. His first book, which he went public with in 94, I believe, is called The Gift of Dyslexia. It has a subtitle of Why Some of the Smartest People Can't Read and How They Can Learn. And this is really Ron's big theories about his own individual problems and how they worked and what he could do about them. He then went on later on and wrote a second book called The Gift of Learning. That's what that looks like there. And this has a subtitle of Proven New Methods for Correcting ADD, Maths and Handwriting Problems. So what Ron did with his own dyslexia is he really looked at it from the inside out. What we have at the moment is a situation where people who are well-meaning, kind, loving people, professionals, they're either psychologists, educators, parents who are desperately trying to help people who are on this learning disability spectrum, as I like to describe it. And what Ron did, these people are looking from the outside in. They're not dyslexic themselves, and they're looking out here at this person, and they're trying to help figure out what this person is doing. So the brilliance of Ron is that he basically looked from the inside out and said, well, how does this work for me? When I try to read, what happens? When I try to focus, what happens? Why can't I focus here? What is it about the alphabet that's triggering my focus? And he basically dived very, very deep into his own dyslexia and his own learning style, to a profound level, way beyond where anybody else has managed to go. Why? Quite simply because he was dyslexic himself, and he could self-reflect to a degree and to a level that I've never known anybody being able to do before. And that's really Ron's brilliance. Ron's ultimate goal, of course, I think was to, and he says so himself, was to really overcome his Asperger's and his autism. So he wrote a third book, which is this book here, and it is called Autism and the Seeds of Change. It's written, co-authored with a lady called Abigail Marshall, who is a wonderful author in her own right. And I think Ron's long-term goal was to really overcome his autism and feel like normal, he says, I think. So Ron had these two problems: the dyslexia spectrum, or the learning disability spectrum, and he was also on the autism spectrum. So what is Ron really saying? What he's saying is that this is what I need as somebody who is dyslexic and autistic, and this is what I need to fully participate in life. This is what I need to be able to read at grade level. This is what I need to be able to spell. This is what I need to be able to focus. And that's why the programs are so effective. So when he was quite young, in his 30s and 40s, he was developing these techniques. He went public in, as I said, in '94, and he's been training facilitators ever since. And I'm one of those facilitators. So why am I a facilitator myself? Well, quite simply, I'm dyslexic. By today's standards, as a child, I would have been diagnosed as probably ADHD. I left school at the age of 16, almost illiterate or semi-literate, and I had a range of problems. I definitely had dyslexia. I don't call it a learning disability. I know there's a lot of controversy about that in Canada, but I like to think of it as dyslexia for all kinds of reasons. I definitely had some dysgraphia. My handwriting was really bad. I had dyscalculia because my math was way off. I still don't really know my times tables. I had dyscalculia. What else did I have? Dysphasia, dyspraxia. So I had a range of problems myself. And I didn't do a program until I was 40 years old. At the age of 40, I realized that I had been struggling all of my life to try to understand my dyslexia. I had tried practically everything that's on the market, and a lot more. Everything from Tai Chi to phonics programs. My mother tried everything as a parent trying to help me. I had various tutors through school. My mother was also a teacher for a while. She had a degree in English literature. So I had lots of help. However, I just could not do it. I also then went on and didn't get diagnosed as being dyslexic until I was in my 20s. It then took me almost another 20 years to find the Davis material. I did a Davis program for myself in 2009, I believe, and by 2010 I was a qualified Davis facilitator, and I've been working with this method in Ottawa for 10 years. And I've worked with the whole range of learning disabilities, everything from learning disability type 1, 2 to dyslexia, ADD, ADHD, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, many more. Most of my clients come to see me have actually not been diagnosed with dyslexia. The more common thing they get diagnosed with in Ottawa is either a learning disability or ADD and ADHD. So the Davis programs are really, what they're really all about is learning disabilities, or dyslexia as Ron likes to call it, from the inside out, not from the outside in. What do we need as dyslexic people to be able to focus, read, spell, do well in school or do well in life, realistically. So if you're a dyslexic yourself and you have one of these learning disability labels, then go and check out a Davis Facilitator. If you're a parent and you're struggling to understand your child who may have been diagnosed with a learning disability and have one of these labels, maybe they've had a psych ed assessment, maybe they have an IEP in school, maybe they're using medication to be able to help them to focus. The Davis program is really helping the child or the person that has the problem understand what they need to do to overcome their problem, whatever that problem might be. So I like to tell people that realistically the Davis program is the simplest, easiest, least expensive and quickest way to really understand this learning disability spectrum as we talk about it. So I hope this is helpful. I'm going to put links below to my website, to the DDAI, which is the main Davis website where there's lots of wonderful information, and also the Davis Autism website. I think in closing, what I would say to parents is that if you have a child and who is dealing with one of these learning disabilities, and you're trying to help your child, then take a good, long, hard look at Davis. What I find is quite a few parents, they'll take a quick cursory look at the Davis program, look at a website or something like that, but they won't really dive down deep, and because they can't easily pigeonhole it, they'll move on by and just say, that's not for me. And that's unfortunate. I would encourage you to at least call a Davis Facilitator, and if you can, get some FaceTime with them and actually sit down with them and say, okay, how does this really work? What is going on with my little kid and how can I help them? Because that's really what Davis Facilitators are doing. There are hundreds of Davis Facilitators all over the world, and as an adult with this problem, as I said earlier, I have tried everything to truly overcome it, and it wasn't until I did the Davis programs that I really felt that that was happening for me. And I've worked with literally hundreds of children myself and adults. The youngest I've worked with is about 6 years old, all the way up to, I think, a man who is in his mid-40s, I think 45, and he had never read a book in his life, and his goal was just to be able to finish reading a book. He now reads fantastically well, and most of my clients, and this goes for all facilitators actually, most of my clients who come to see us, they're generally reading below grade level. Even if they have ADD and ADHD and look like they can read at grade level, they're very often not. And what the Davis program really does is most of my clients learn to read in about a year or less. There's a program that they do, which is an intensive program with a facilitator. We have various programs depending on what problems they're having. And then there's follow-up work that's done at home. So we like to think of our programs as sort of one intensive program and then a year of follow-up work, which the person does at home on their own. And that then will correct their dyslexia, or their ADD, or their ADHD, depending what problem they're having. So Ron basically developed a program for every single problem a person could have who's on this learning disability spectrum. So that's what I do, that's who I am. It's a little bit about Ron, a little bit about me. I'm going to do a series of videos that are going to be really diving down deep into the Davis programs, myself, some of my clients, how this helps people. So please stay tuned, and please like, share, subscribe, and please follow the links below. Okay, I think that's it for now. Bye for now.